Joining us now to talk about the Chargers. He covers them for The Athletic. That is Daniel Popper. Thanks for joining us today, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
First and most important question, are you related to John Popper from Blues Traveler?
I am not, but
Okay.
It's become a recurring bit on various radio shows that they'll play me in with some Blues Brothers tunes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. We'll start with the quarterback at first. Justin Herbert, do you assume he's going to play tonight, or is this some gamesmanship and you think it'll be Trey Lance?
No, I'm expecting him to play. I've covered his entire career, and I've seen him play through some pretty gnarly injuries, whether that was fractured rib cartilage in 2022, a high ankle sprain last season. He's even played through a broken finger on his offhand before in 2023. So I'm expecting him to play. I think the bigger question is, how does it change the structure of the offense? How much will he be able to play under center? How does that change things from a game plan perspective for Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman?
Yeah, well, I mean, that is the next question. So if you assume that, under center is more difficult and the running game is more difficult, how does that mess with the identity of what the Chargers have been successful with so far this season?
Yeah, so in that game against the Raiders last week when he broke his hand early in the game, they kind of shifted their run game to a lot of pistol stuff. He didn't take an under center snap after he broke his hand on that first drive, but they were able to transition a lot of their looks into the pistol formation. So I would assume if he can't play under center, you would see a lot of pistol and they could get to some stuff from that. Obviously, what that eliminates is some I formation stuff, which they like to do with Scott Matlock as their fullback. Takes away some of the play action boot game that you can get to from under center. We'll see exactly what happens here. I mean, in practice this week during some walkthrough stuff, he was aligning under center when they were going through those snaps and concepts. However, he wasn't actually taking the snap. Center Bradley Bozeman was sort of turning around and handing it to him. So it'll be interesting to see. I think, they will be prepared if they really want to go under center and Justin Herbert can't, for Trey Lance to come into the game and do some of that stuff. The only situations where I could really see that happening is, some goal line looks or maybe 4-minute offense. So a lot to be determined in terms of what the structure of the offense actually looks like. But the pistol formation is available to them, and they can get to a lot of their run stuff out of that formation.
And the last thing on Herbert, when he was in practice, is he wearing a cast on his non-throwing hand? What is he dealing with in terms of protecting that?
Yeah, so we went through a couple of different variations this week. Early on in the week when he returned to practice, he had kind of like a plastic brace/cast over his glove. Later in the week, he transitioned to sort of like a baseball guard, like a Nike baseball guard that you would wear over your hand if you were in the batter's box. So I think they're kind of working through some different variations, and we saw a couple of those this week. Obviously, I'll have my binoculars out at SoFi during warm-ups to see exactly which variation of it they're going with in the game. But something hard to cover the top of the hand where the break occurred to try and eliminate a potential re-injury situation.
This team, Daniel, from an identity standpoint, it's been a little hard to figure out. Most people would think a Harbaugh team is a run-based sort of offense, but Justin Herbert has put the ball up pretty well this year. Has had a lot of success throwing the football this year, getting the ball spread around to his guys. So they throw the ball with effectiveness as well. Him not being, I wonder how will this broken hand sort of affect what they do going into the game tonight? Do they lean more to that run game, or do they still do what they've done a lot of, which is actually throw the ball at times this year?
Yeah, I would expect them to lean into the run game for a few reasons. Obviously, number one is what Herbert's dealing with the hand. Number two is they're down both of their starting tackles, and they've been working with a bunch of different variations up front this year, and they can't really drop back in the same way without Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater on the field. And then you go back to how the Eagles defense played against the Bears in that Black Friday game, what the Bears were able to do on the ground, getting into a lot of spread formations and 11 personnel and being able to run out of some of those looks. So I would expect them to run a decent amount. I don't think it's as much related to Herbert's hands as it is they can't really pass protect when they're going into traditional drop back just because of the injuries. And so when they have, been successful throwing the ball since those injuries, it's been a lot of quick game and then a lot of play action where they can max protect it up front and be more secure there in terms of pushing it down the field. So for those reasons, I think they're going to lean into the run game. But I think you're exactly right. identity-wise, it's been tough to pin down exactly what this team is, largely because of a lot of these injuries up front.
Daniel Popper of The Athletic with us, who covers the Chargers. Wanted to ask you about a former Eagle that it's sort of funny. We all look at the Eagles' struggles in the run game this year and say, they should have kept Maiyck Becton. And then they look at Maiyck Becton, who seems like he has struggled over there. What has the story been with him this year? Has it been injury? Has it been him not playing well? Why hasn't he settled in well there when he played so well here last year?
Yeah, kind of all of the above. You start with, the inability to stay on the field. You go back to week 1 in Brazil, he had food poisoning. He's had a hand injury that's knocked him out of games. He had a concussion. He's had a knee issue. So he hasn't played consistently in terms of staying on the field. When he has been on the field, it's been very up and down. He's obviously a better run blocker than pass protector, but he hasn't lived up to the billing in either area. He's had some moments. But I think, as far as why it hasn't transitioned as well, the Chargers went into the season thinking they were going to have Rashawn Slater at left tackle and Joe Alt at right tackle. They lose both of them. Rashawn in training camp, Alt missed time early in the season with a high ankle sprain and ended up suffering a season-ending high ankle injury later in the season. So not having those two pieces, I think, has been an impact. He's playing next to a worse center in Bradley Bozeman. So it just hasn't clicked. I think he's playing in a worse environment in terms of the players around him. He obviously in Philadelphia had arguably the best offensive line coach in the league, and Jeff Stoutland, and then he's really struggled to stay on the field and has dealt with numerous ailments, and that's obviously impacted his ability to find a rhythm as well.
So the Eagles' offense has not been great this year. If you're looking at what they are matched up against with the Chargers defensively, where are the soft spots with the Chargers that the Eagles could potentially take advantage of?
Yeah, well, I think you start with the run defense. The Chargers have been very inconsistent in that area throughout the season. They had their bye in Week 11, came out of the bye and made some adjustments against the Raiders just in terms of devoting more resources to the line of scrimmage. They showed some 5-man fronts with inside linebacker Deion Henley playing more of an edge role. They started rotating some safeties down pre-snap to show single high and get that extra body in the box. And it worked against the Raiders, but the Raiders are the worst rushing team in the league. So I think first and foremost, you have to try and test that out and see if those adjustments are actually real or not. Secondly, in terms of pass defense, the Chargers are very, very good in terms of defending passes outside the numbers. Number 1 in pass defense efficiency outside the numbers. In between the numbers, they're 24th in pass defense efficiency. These numbers from True Media. And so obviously a lot of talk about how Jalen Hurts doesn't love to throw over the middle of the field, but if there is a weakness in this Chargers pass defense, it is in those areas of the field over the middle. So can the Eagles run the ball? And then can Jalen Hurts, attack the middle of the field where the Chargers have some limitations, particularly, Denzel Perryman, an inside linebacker, is probably their weak link in the back seven in terms of pass defense. So those are the two areas I would be focusing on if I was, game planning against the Chargers defense.
Yeah, I'm interested in what the thought on the Eagles offense right now is from out there, whether it be from I don't know how much you can glean from the Chargers standpoint, 'cause I'm sure they're going to be respectful in their assessment of the Eagles offense. But what from the fan base out there, what do you guys think when you think of the Eagles offense and you watch the Eagles offense this year? How do you feel they've operated?
Yeah, I think that just talking to guys in the locker room, I think there's respect for the talent.
Yeah.
There's certainly respect for what Jalen Hurts can be as a runner, particularly. I think the Chargers are expecting, that knob to be turned up in terms of the amount of design rushes that Jalen Hurts is taking in this game. Not push design rushes, but design rushes from 3+ yards to gain to the first down, just in terms of power. Zone read, quarterback draw, some of that stuff. Obviously, the weapons on the outside of receiver are very legit, and there's, a lot of respect for, Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. I think, just from what I saw on tape and some of the conversations that I had in the locker room, it's just looked a little disjointed. A lot of penalties. I mean, the Eagles are 5th in the NFL in penalty yards on offense this season. You just watch the film back, and there's guys running into each other, and I mentioned specifically Dallas Goedert tripping up Jordan Mailata and that, slicing across the formation early in that game against the Bears. But the reality is, it could click at any moment. And I think there's a certain respect level there just as far as what they have from a talent standpoint. And, even though the Eagles have been struggling, I don't see or have an understanding that the Chargers are overlooking this offense to any capacity at all.
So, what's your gut tell you about tonight? The Philadelphia Eagles are a difficult team for us who watch them every single week and talk about them incessantly to really figure out what we're getting out of them tonight. What does your gut tell you about this game tonight?
I'm expecting like low scoring, ugly game, defensive game, and see who sort of pulls it out at the end. I think the Chargers are going to have a good plan for the Eagles offense. I think a lot will come down to how they defend the run. If they're able to do that, I think they're going to take away these outside throws and force Jalen Hurts to throw over the middle. The Chargers just have a lot of question marks on offense. What is Herbert going to be with his hand? How much can they go under center? They ran the ball well against the Raiders, but what will that look like against, a better unit with the Eagles? So I'm not expecting a big offensive game tonight. I think it's going to be both defenses playing well, and then, whoever makes the play at the end is going to pull it out. That's sort of my expectation heading into this one.
All right, man. We appreciate your time today and the insight, and you can read Daniel's work over at The Athletic. We appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yep.